Korean Peninsula, 4:47 in the morning. 50 North Korean launchers fire 250 AI-guided rockets at 3 American bases in South Korea. At the same time, 100 commandos emerge from a tunnel beneath the demilitarized zone and storm the only radar keeping the entire region's missile defense alive. 41 minutes later, every launcher, every tunnel, and every North Korean battery is burning scrap metal. 0 American combat casualties. 100 commandos dead on a hill they never should have climbed. North Korea's most ambitious rocket artillery program, built over 2 months, destroyed before the sun rose over Pyongyang. But Kim Jong Un made 6 catastrophic mistakes. First, he trusted a tunnel that American intelligence had already mapped. Second, he struck bases that had been empty for 24 hours. Third, he underestimated the redundancy of the missile defense system. Fourth, he used communications that a nuclear submarine was intercepting from the bottom of the sea. Fifth, he fired his entire new arsenal in a single volley with nothing held in reserve. And sixth, the worst of all, he believed the United States was too busy with Iran to respond in the Pacific. Each of those mistakes was lethal. Together, they were military suicide. To understand how 250 rockets and 100 men became the greatest humiliation in the history of the North Korean military, you have to go back 9 days. 9 days earlier. Pyongyang. The plaza in front of the April 25th Palace of Culture. 50 KN-25 launch vehicles lined up in perfect formation, each one carrying 5 600mm tubes, the largest caliber ever mounted on a multiple rocket system. Kim Jong Un climbed into the driver's seat of one and drove it himself while state cameras rolled. He declared before the Ninth Party Congress that these weapons combined the precision of a tactical missile with the rate of fire of multiple launch artillery. That artificial intelligence had changed the rules. That the enemy should tremble. What the cameras didn't capture was the meeting that followed. In an underground chamber, before 12 members of the State Affairs Commission, Kim revealed part 2 of the plan. They weren't just going to bomb the bases. They were going to blind the radar guiding the interceptors. 100 men from the 11th Special Operations Corps would exit a tunnel dug over 18 months beneath the demilitarized zone. Target: the AN/TPY-2 of the THAAD system at Songju. Without that radar, the Patriots fire blind. And with 250 rockets saturating the sky, they need every single interceptor working flawlessly. Then the Lieutenant General in charge of signals intelligence spoke up. Supreme Leader, the NSA intercepts encrypted communications even with frequency-hopping protocols. If they detect the volume of traffic needed to coordinate this, they'll know something's coming. I recommend a minimum 72-hour period of radio silence before launch. Kim stared at him, asked whether he was questioning the Supreme Leader's decision or simply suggesting the enemy was smarter than they were. The general sat down. He didn't speak again. The plan moved forward, and that was the last chance North Korea had to avoid what was coming. Pyongyang's logic made sense from their side of the border. 2 carrier strike groups were sailing toward Iran, the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, the USS Gerald R. Ford crossing the Mediterranean. The transfer of combined operational command between American and South Korean forces was in its most delicate phase. The Freedom Shield exercises weren't starting until March. Kim calculated a 48-hour window where the response would be slow, uncoordinated, split between 2 theaters. Just enough time to destroy infrastructure, declare victory, and offer a ceasefire? It was reasonable. It was logical. And it was exactly what the Pentagon wanted him to think. Because 60 meters below the surface, off the coast of Wonsan, something was listening. USS Missouri, SSN 780, Virginia-class Block 3. 115 meters of black steel, invisible to enemy sonar, cruising at 4 knots in ultra-quiet mode. 72 hours before the attack, her towed array antenna intercepted bursts of encrypted communication between Rocket Force headquarters and launch units scattered across 6 provinces. The volume wasn't consistent with a drill. The cadence wasn't consistent with practice. Every transmission contained coordinates and time windows. Operational deployment. The signal traveled through a secure undersea cable to the NSA station in Misawa, Japan. From there to Fort Meade. From there to the Pentagon. Within 4 hours, the commander of U.S. Forces Korea received the most urgent briefing of his career. Protocol Vigilant Storm was activated, but not with sirens, with routine rotations, with maintenance exercises, with carefully staged normalcy. Let Pyongyang keep believing their rockets are going to find targets. 24 hours out, combat units from the 2nd Infantry Division moved to field positions under the cover of a scheduled rotation. F-16s from the 8th Fighter Wing took off from Kunsan on a night exercise they never came back from. They landed on camouflage dispersal strips in the southern end of the peninsula. Families received quiet instructions to head for shelters. At Seongju, the THAAD radar got silent reinforcements. An additional platoon from the 35th Air Defense Artillery, with M240 machine guns and Claymore perimeter mines. Intelligence had picked up anomalous seismic activity 600 meters to the north, consistent with underground excavation. They knew they were coming. They knew which way. But the deadliest trap was set thousands of kilometers away. At Misawa, Japan, 12 35A Lightning IIs loaded GBU-53 Stormbreaker bombs and AMRAAM missiles. Engines running, pilots in the cockpit. At Anderson, Guam, 8 Bone B Lancers loaded 96 JASSM-ERs each. 768 stealth cruise missiles. Range, 900 kilometers. 450 kilo warheads. Undetectable until the last second. Picture the scene from above. The Korean bases look normal on satellite. Hangars with lights on. Parking lots full of vehicles, but inside nothing. And thousands of kilometers away, the most concentrated strike force in the Pacific is sitting with engines hot. 4:47 a.m. Total darkness. -3 degrees. In the mountains between Kaesong, Haeju, and Sariwon, 50 KN-25 launchers have rolled out of their tunnels and positioned themselves in clearings camouflaged with thermal netting. Tubes elevated to 45 degrees. An encrypted order runs through the command network, and the sky breaks apart. 250 600mm rockets leave their tubes in under 40 seconds. 5 per launcher. 3 tons each. 8 meters long. 300-kilo warhead packed with submunitions. Inertial guidance with AI-driven terminal correction in the final 10 seconds of flight. 4 seconds later, 12 transporter erector launchers fire KN-23 Hwasong-11A missiles. Depressed quasi-ballistic trajectory flying below 40 kilometers altitude under the THAAD's operational floor. 1,000-kilo warhead. Evasive maneuvers in the terminal phase. Designed to dodge the Patriot. And at 4:48, 600 meters north of Seongju, inside a 3-meter-wide tunnel reinforced with steel beams, 100 men felt the tremor. The ground shook beneath their boots. Above their heads, the rockets had just launched. That was the signal. The team commander raised his fist. Nobody spoke. There was no need. 18 months digging that passage. 18 months knowing the day they used it would probably be their last. Every man wore a cyanide capsule around his neck. They didn't expect to come back. They just needed to reach the antenna. The tunnel mouth opened on the hillside, and 100 commandos from the 11th Corps emerged in a double file. Black uniforms. Russian-made night vision. AK-12s with suppressors. C4 demolition charges. They sprinted uphill toward the radar. Destroy the AN/TPY-2 before the second wave of KN-23s reached their apogee. No radar, Patriots go blind. No Patriots, the missiles fly clean. 250 rockets in the air. 100 men charging uphill. 12 ballistic missiles on evasive trajectories. All of it happening at once. The most complex saturation attack ever launched against American forces in the Pacific. The plan was brilliant. The problem was who they launched it against. The AN/TPY-2 detected the first wave at 11 seconds. The signal traveled at the speed of light to the Patriot PAC-3 batteries at Osan and Humphreys. Interceptors launched at a rate of 1 per second, 96 per battery. 250 rockets against 192 interceptors. The math favors the attacker. The first intercepts between the KN-25s and the Patriot missiles occurred at 38 kilometers altitude. Inside the Patriot control shelter at Osan, 2 operators stared at their screens without blinking. The system automatically prioritized rockets tracking toward critical infrastructure. But when the counter dropped from 49 to 31, the automated voice said something no operator ever wants to hear. Intercept capacity degraded. That means the system can no longer cover all targets simultaneously. Someone has to choose. The commanding officer gave the hardest order of his career: protect Seongju. Let the rockets headed for the runways at Osan and Humphreys through. Sacrifice asphalt to save the radar. Because if the radar goes down, there's nothing left to save. Some KN-25 started slipping through. At 4:52, Osan's main runway took 300 kilos of submunitions. 2 hangars at Humphreys collapsed. From North Korean satellites, analysts saw the impacts. Target hit. Strikes confirmed on all 3 installations. What they couldn't see was what had been inside those hangars. Nothing. North Korea was bombing a movie set. But at Seongju, there was no movie set. There were 32 soldiers, a $1.2 billion radar, and 100 men willing to die. 4:49. The first commandos hit the outer perimeter. The claymores detonated. 15 men dropped in 3 seconds, 700 steel balls at 1,200 meters per second at waist height. The ones behind them didn't stop. 11th Corps Doctrine. Speed over survival. The 32 Americans opened fire. M4s with night optics. 2 M240s on the flanks at 850 rounds a minute. 4:51. For every 5 that fell, 10 reached the next line of cover. 4:53. 50 meters from the radar. Close enough for RPG-7s. 3 grenades flew toward the antenna. The first hit 20 meters from the base. The second took out an auxiliary generator. The third passed within 4 meters of the rotating antenna and detonated against a retaining wall. The screens in the shelter flickered. If the next charge reached the antenna, missile defense for the entire southern sector would go dark, and the KN-23s were 90 seconds from their targets. 4:54. A first sergeant whose name remains classified grabbed an M249 saw and left his fortified position, 15 meters across open ground under direct fire to a mound overlooking the left flank. At less than 30 meters from the commandos pushing toward the antenna, he opened fire. 850 rounds a minute. 7 commandos dropped in 4 seconds. The advance stopped cold. 4:55. The other 31 Americans repositioned 2 shooters onto the shelter roof with thermal optics. Every commando was a bright silhouette against the cold ground. 1 shot, 1 hit. 3-dimensional kill box. Fire from the front, the flanks, and above. The North Korean commandos couldn't advance, couldn't fall back, and couldn't hide. And while the men were dying on the hill, the illusion was falling apart inside the bunker beneath Pyongyang. 4:55. Strikes confirmed at Humphreys. Strikes at Osan. Seongju team has reached the perimeter. Kim slammed the table in satisfaction. Draft the communique. 3 bases neutralized. Imperialism has learned its lesson. 5:04. The smile froze. Supreme Leader. The bases that were hit show no material destruction. There are no aircraft. The hangars were empty. Ice-cold silence. 5:09. We've lost contact with Battery 3. 5:11. Battery 7 is not responding. 5:14. Battery 12 confirmed destroyed. Multiple aerial contacts over all 6 provinces. They're stealth. We can't see them until they hit. The shift from triumph to horror took 10 minutes. Kim stood there watching the tactical display as the dots representing his launchers vanished one by one. Each dot was 5 tubes, 20 men, and 2 months of production turned to smoke. How did they know, he asked. Nobody had an answer. The answer was 60 meters beneath the East Sea. The Missouri had transmitted the exact coordinates of every launch position 72 hours earlier. The F-35. As crossed, the 38th parallel in stealth mode at 4:51, 4 minutes after the first shot. 12 invisible aircraft with every launcher marked before they even crossed the border. In the squadron leader's cockpit, the APG-81 screens showed the KN-25 launchers as green rectangles on the thermal map. The vehicle's engines were still hot from firing. They weren't trying to hide. They didn't know they needed to. The pilot selected his first 2 targets, confirmed the firing solution, and released 2 Stormbreakers. On his screen, the green rectangles flickered and disappeared. No sound, no drama. From 12,000 meters up, destruction is silent and surgical. Down below, at Seongju, it was mud, blood, and screaming. Up above, it was digital geometry. 2 completely different wars happening in the same minute. From Guam, the 8 Bonebee Lancers had taken off at 4:30, 17 minutes before the attack because intelligence knew it was coming. 768 JASSM-ERs flying at Mach 0.9, 15 meters above the terrain. Warheads designed to punch through bunkers. 502, first launcher destroyed. 505, 3 more. 508, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th. The F-35s hunted the mobile KN-23 TELs with infrared-guided Stormbreaker bombs. A running transport engine is a bonfire to the sensor. Statement from the South Korean Ministry of Defense, issued at 5:10 local time. We condemn this unprovoked aggression and confirm that combined forces have activated the highest alert response in full coordination with the United States. The EA-18G Growlers from the carrier USS Ronald Reagan at Yokosuka entered North Korean airspace like electronic ghosts. The S-300 and KN-06 systems tried to power up. The Growlers fed them false signals. The anti-aircraft missiles went chasing phantoms while the real bombs fell. 513, 20 launchers destroyed. 520, 35. And on the hill at Seongju, where the gunfire still hadn't stopped, the surviving commandos heard something they weren't expecting. Helicopters. 515. Black Hawks from the 2nd Aviation Battalion appeared over the ridge. 40 soldiers fast roped down behind the commandos, caught between the original defenders and the relief force. Some tried to detonate their charges. The snipers on the shelter roof didn't give them the time. 528. 41 minutes after the first shot. 50 KN-25 launchers. Destroyed. 50 out of 50. 12 KN-23 TELs. Destroyed. 14 air defense batteries. Neutralized. The artillery program Kim had driven with his own hands 9 days earlier had become a line of smoking craters. 531. The hill at Seongju was cleared. 100 commandos stormed it. 100 died on it. The AN-TPY-2 radar had shrapnel embedded in its frame and a generator wrecked, but the antenna was still spinning. The defense never went down. The sergeant who grabbed the M249 took shrapnel in his left shoulder. He kept firing one-armed until reinforcements arrived. His name is still classified. His actions aren't, because without those 60 seconds where one man left cover, the antenna would have fallen. And if the antenna had fallen, the KN-23s would have come in unopposed over a peninsula with millions of civilians who hadn't been evacuated. That's the distance between catastrophe and victory. One man, 60 seconds, 30 meters of open ground. Pentagon statement, 6:15 Washington time. In the early morning hours, DPRK forces launched an unprovoked attack with missiles and rocket artillery against U.S. installations in the Republic of Korea, accompanied by a ground incursion targeting missile defense infrastructure. The attack was anticipated. Forces were dispersed in advance, and the response eliminated 100% of launch platforms. The United States reserves the right to take any and all additional measures deemed necessary. Statement from Japan's National Security Council. Japan has elevated its missile defense posture and will coordinate fully with its allies to ensure regional stability. At 7:45 Beijing time, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a three-line communiqué. China expresses deep concern over the military escalation on the Korean Peninsula. We urge all parties to exercise maximum restraint and resolve differences through dialogue. China opposes the use of force as an instrument of policy. Not a single word condemning Pyongyang. Not a single word backing Washington. The most eloquent silence of the entire crisis. Beijing wasn't going to defend its allies' disaster, but it wasn't going to prove Washington right either. The real message wasn't in what it said, it was in what it didn't say. You're on your own, Kim. Pyongyang issued no statement for the next 12 hours. This is what happened in 41 minutes. At 4:47, 250 rockets launched. At 4:48, 100 commandos emerged beneath the DMZ. At 4:52, the first impacts hit empty runways. At 4:53, the Claymores stopped the first wave at Songju. At 5:02, the first launcher destroyed. At 5:15, reinforcements at Songju. At 5:28, the last launcher ceased to exist. At 5:31, the hill was cleared. Final tally. 250 rockets launched, 161 intercepted, 89 struck evacuated infrastructure. Runways repairable within 72 hours. 100 commandos stormed Seongju. 100 died at Seongju. 50 launchers destroyed 50 out of 50. 12 KN-23 TELs destroyed. 14 air defense batteries neutralized. American casualties, 7 wounded. 0 killed in action. Kim Jong Un drove one of those launchers with his own hands 9 days before it became scrap metal. He declared no country on earth possessed that technology. That the enemy should tremble. He was right about one thing. Nobody else has a weapon like that. Because now even he doesn't have it anymore. Don't bomb a base that's been empty for a day. Don't storm a radar defended by men who know you're coming. Don't fire your entire arsenal in a single volley that a submarine already heard. Don't trust a tunnel that intelligence spotted before you finish digging it. And above all, don't underestimate a country that spent 80 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Because the difference between building a weapon and knowing how to use one is the same difference between 2 months of production and 41 minutes of existence. That's the lesson of the peninsula. And lessons on the peninsula are always written in fire.